outside of the puddle, which is really what the show was known for, some of the more major creatures that were developed for the show that really stood the test of time were replicators. And I'm referring to the spider form. I'm not referring to the humans that came later. Were you involved at Image Engine in late season 3 when these guys
Nemesis
made their debut in Nemesis?
Yes.
Oh crap, what are we gonna do?
Oh shit, what's going on? They approached us and said, we want you to be the lead house on doing the replicators for this upcoming episode, and it's going to be big, and we're going to split it between 3 other visual effects, you and 2 other visual effects houses, but we want you guys to take the lead. And when they gave us the design, we're looking at the concept art being like, wait, those are all individual pieces? Yes. You want them to fall apart? Yes. And you want it to move like a spider? Yes. And we were just like, again, there goes the quote level. But at the end of the day, it was a really fun show to work on. I mean, we made it work. And I remember sitting there assembling 225 replicator blocks per replicator. That's the exact number. And, building the animation rig for it, and it's all hand done. When you see groups of those replicators, every single one of them at that time was done by hand, animated by hand. And every single time that they explode from gunfire was hand animated as far as an explosion. We would create 4 different explosion simulations, and we would run a dynamic simulation on it and then tweak them because the software and the computing power, again, couldn't handle everything. So we had to, hand keyframe where they're going to land. And there were certain scenarios where it worked on the ground, but not, around and coming on the ceiling and the walls. And
if they're on the ceiling, they're going to fall up based on their perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, there was a couple, and everyone's going to look at this now that I say this, but there was a couple where they just disappear, and we just literally switched them out with a bunch of, pieces just exploding just to make it easier and faster. Right. But there were you had your hero bugs, and then you had the swarm where you didn't pay attention to them. So usually the first 2 rows in the big swarm of replicators, or anytime there was an individual, the first 2 rows were hand animated. The rows behind that, where they were all overlapping, they were, pretty much on a cycle, just doing their thing. And if you just saw them on their own, they would be sliding all over the place, but you don't notice it because it's just this crowd of, feet and bodies and everything wiggling, dun, 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 doing their thing. And believe me, I know this.
Joel. Miss him.
And at the end of the day, you don't notice it. And that goes right back to the, what can we get away with? What is the audience going to see versus what our software and hardware can produce within this time frame? And I think we pulled it off. I mean, we got an Emmy nomination for that one, which was fun. So, and quite a few other Replicator episodes after that we got Emmy nominations for. So they obviously were a favorite, so.
For sure. Yeah. I remember I watched the episode as it aired originally and was just blown away because at this point there was a mythology built into the show that the Asgard are kept busy for some reason by some real big problem. And so when that's revealed, it had better be good. And then I remember thinking to myself, like, Star Trek replicators? No, these things completely different. It took a while for the brain to be like, okay, that's not what that is anymore. That is these things now.
No, and we're not making Earl Grey hot on this show.
Exactly right. But the last shots of Nemesis, where you have, it had to have been 200 of them, maybe more, in the wide shot as they're marching in to that main hall there, is one of the most amazing shots of the show. And not only that, but not only do you have to have the and this is something specific to the replicators in particular because of how fast they move, the bodies, but the computer also has to add a blur.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? That's extra computation?
Oh yeah.
It can't be a clear shot when you freeze the frame. They're in motion, and our eyes are used to out of focus when something is in motion.
Yeah. So we would render groups of them.
Oh.
And then composite them together. So the computer could handle maybe 10 to 20 depending on how close they are in frame, and then we would organize front to back and left to right, and then have that those rendered elements composited together in the 2D software over the plate. So that's how we got around that solution. Later in Arc of Truth, when I was working on that, I had a guy program a walk cycle so it would detect the walls and various, because we're on the spaceship, and the walls, and the walls are obviously not smooth like a Nemesis. So I had a program like, oh, okay, we're going to detect where the walls are and automate it, and all we had to do is drag the torso around, and the legs just kind of did their thing, which was fun. But it's a huge contrast from Nemesis, right? And that's kind of the evolution of the whole series. Is everything started out like, we can't do this, but we're going to try. And then we did, and we thought a lot of it was groundbreaking.
Well,
there's a couple times.
Correct.
Yeah. There's a couple times that we were quite proud. There was, if I may,
please
tangent a little bit, Revelations with Heimdall.
Yeah.
Right. Was it Heimdall? I think it was
Heimdall.
Anyway.
Was the first fully, technically, Freyr came through the Stargate, but Revelations
fair enough, yes.
was the first episode that we had fully CG Asgard.
And I think it was the first, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know, but from what I know it was the first kind of guest star CG character.
So in
fully
CG, yeah. And I must correct myself. Asgard had been seen in specific shots earlier in the show, like Thor gets out of his chair, he walks over, but he's very rudimentary. Heimdall, I'm pretty positive, was the first fully CG character introduced in the show. I'm racking my brain to make sure that's right. I'm pretty positive, and Terrell played him. So,
Terrell did, and I remember doing motion capture with Terrell. It was really fun.
Wow.
She has a dancing background, so she does. There's a lot of flourish in the character. We had to kind of ask, okay, maybe not. We might want to tone that down a little bit. No, but what I'm referring to is, there was a CG Thor before that, and we had CG Asgard. But to have such a major role throughout the episode, there was a lot of shots. And it was the first one that we had done motion capture with, which was really fun. And it was the first one we had actually used high dynamic range lighting with. So this is a part of the evolution of the tool set. So we actually took the illumination from the set and used that to illuminate the character instead of faking it with our computer lights and spotlights and point lights. And
that's when the ball comes into play. You
use the spherical ball and you wrap that in your 3D environment. And if you do your HDR image correctly, you'll be able to source the intensity of the lights and the color temperature, and you could use it for reflections, obviously, which makes a huge difference. And so that was our first use of high dynamic range lighting, which became standard in the industry afterwards. I mean, we had been reading white papers, and this is what those guys are doing. Let's try it. And it was pretty groundbreaking for a TV series. Yeah.
It's a pretty extraordinary character. I remember watching it and just buying that he's there. That was the one thing there were a couple things that I was thinking in this was, wow, they've finally gone there. Are they going to continue to do this? And also, they probably had realistically a fair amount of money left over from previous episodes. So they were like, go for it. He couldn't have been cheap to create, because you're talking dozens of shots of him standing alongside Carter and interacting with the character. My favorite scene from this is O'Neill reaches out his hand, and it's all done off camera for Heimdall to shake it. And Heimdall is like shaking him vigorously, and you don't see it on camera, but the implication is that he's just wagging his hand. It was a fun character, man, and Terrell must have been a blast.
And Richard Dean Anderson, he played that up a lot, which was really good. And I remember, I think it was Brad, right? Said, and please don't misquote me, I think it was, said, we want him to shake his hand, and we're just like, too much money. We can't interact with anybody. Okay, we'll do it off screen. We're still going to shake his hand. And that's where that came out of.
Thanks for watching this clip from Dial the Gate. You can find the full live stream shows on our YouTube channel or visit dialthegate.com for the complete schedule. See you on the other side.